Okay, so it's almost time to start talking about time, which is maybe one of the most central elements that will unfold here in this journey that we are all of us having, particularly through the lens of this video series on the inner dance energy school process. So, it's been around a week since I last created one of these screencasts, and it's pretty good to be back. I'm feeling like there's something significant that's coming together, and it may be becoming clear as we move on through this vision quest. Um, how also it breaks apart and doesn't come together when we look at how life maps have this habit of fragmenting the more you come into the sense of the whole of each and every part. You realize that um, you are your own life map, and however that is coming about to feel a sense of authorship, which is individuated at the same time to sense a universality, which is to feel a great sensitivity to the community, the environment, the life world as you know it. And I guess individuals now take on the form of individual concepts, individual maps, if you will, that are like people themselves. They each have their own complex quirks, like individual, unique, and novel parts and parcels. So I'm going to be sharing with you the work of a very good friend who has been quite instrumental in allowing us to witness what exactly does it mean to be whole, even as we are our own parts. We've so far gone through some significant mapping work, moving from section to section, looking at the person in different ways and in different means. So in just we're going through the unraveling of through this documentation, observing the many facets of who we are through the inner dance energy school journey. And you've been bringing together different mappings, framed here through the visuals presented on these boards, which are more or less mind maps or frameworks as well, like models of cognitive development, models of transcendence or the going beyond. There are certain proposals and hypotheses coming out or emerging from all these on what is the evolving mind or what is evolving consciousness. So I'm going to be sharing the work of Amara Samata, who is one of the more illustrious facilitators of inner dance process, who's taken the energy to her own really brilliant, brilliant manifestation called the inner guidance process. Very similar to how energy school came about, like people asking her, could you share with us what it means to be you? and to kind of do what you do in a way that it's also not really yours, but it's just as much mine. Um, it's fascinating to backtrack to how it all began, which amazingly brings together, whether she also knows this or not, brings together a lot of the things that have already come up in the previous videos. Um, and I pulled the video out just now, and I was looking at it, and so it uh, surprised me to hear her speak about certain things that were just brought up in the last video. We spoke about the three orders of Lacanian philosophy, and we were mapping out basically how inner dance pretty much is situated on a certain frame, a certain part, a certain section called the symbolic, which is over here a kind of halfway house or point in between the real and the imaginary. So basically, we hear in the video that I'm about to present Amara speaking about this very intense stage where reality was both the real and the imaginary. We've been looking primarily at what inner dance is like, not as a spiritual modality or as a healing process, but as a stage in the awakening, the stage in the spiritual awakening process, where we are coming from the realm of the imaginary, and as we make our way into the real, what does it actually feel, and what does it actually mean to be re-entering that through the portal of the symbolic. And so we hear Amara speaking about the stage where life as it is presented to us is both and, or neither or. So symbolic isn't just the and or the or, but it's actually to be here, where everything is inclusive, that there is the absence of judgment, the binaries, the dualities, but at the same time we are as much in reality as we are experiencing it through mind, body, life world, to be human, at the same time to be one, to be universe, means that we're at this crossroads right now as a society, as an aggregate of the cultures of this world. So before we go to that, I'd like to go back to the audio sharing. We are currently calling the dialogue, which was the recorded experience, inner dance experience in Kuala Lumpur that took place between me and Ash in her condo, where she modeled for us another version, another look into what it means to go into the heightened state, the expanded state of awareness. There was a lot of talk in that video around different elements, one of which was time. This is in fact the first inquiry in the sharing. What is time? And one feedback or answer that came up was the element of movement came up a lot. This is one of the many things that we're asking here exactly, which is what is this inner dance? What does it mean to go into this curious, spontaneous, powerful energy movement that seems to deepen the expanded state? So we're gonna look at maybe a different way in which we regard the um, energy wave. We call it the Vesica Pisces. Let's look at another way of framing the XY axis here. So were we to no, let's redo this. Okay, should be maybe somewhere here. Were we to draw a line that looks at the movement from a sense of center, which is here, going vertical and going horizontal. So were we to wonder so far, what have we discovered? What have we mapped out through these energy school mind maps? The word probably that we would look at here that is happening is the unfoldment of consciousness through both time and space. So were we to ask for now, what are we talking about? What is this part of the topographical categorical network of the inner dance process are we speaking to now? It is basically the definition, one way of defining mind, or the definition of thought. That definition of thought process is what is the unfoldment of consciousness through the time-space continuum, which could be another synonym for mind or reality. Okay, so going back to the audio sharing between me and Ash, there was a thing around movement. Movement could actually be one of the answers to this. Like, what is movement? Maybe were we to bring the circadian rhythms in contact with the Vesica Pisces, this would be it, this conversation. This is the movement. This is who we are. We are the movement. We go vertical, we go horizontal, we evolve, we transition, we transform, we grow up, we grow old. What does that mean? What does all of that mean? So let's maybe move this movement button here to witness these two in the axis. So the conversation around synchrony and diachrony has, I think, come up, or is coming up, or if it hasn't, it is coming up now for sure. So what is synchrony and what is diachrony? This ushers us into a very necessary part of the structuring and deconstructing aspects of the energy ascent and descent that the inner dance looks at. And it's very important that this comes up, primarily because we will destroy, or we will deconstruct much of what we construct. We decreate, we move away from everything that we embrace and come towards, I'm having to go through then some very important, essential frameworks that have helped to structure not just this moment, but our unfoldment through history. Okay, so I'm gonna apologize to you because I'm looking at this, and I may not have actually been looking at these when I was when I was configuring these parts and parcels, these bits. Okay, so as a testament to my non-infallibility, the unfoldment of space is the vertical axis, and the unfoldment of time is the horizontal axis. So diachrony then is history as we know how it comes to be, a forward motion from a sense of genesis, the unfoldment that is a left to right directionality. And space is the unfoldment of the vertical, so it's the shifting from the sense of bottom to a sense of ascension and ascendarity, ascending movement from a bottom to a top peak place. So movement. Ash spoke about movement. I am that movement. Something is moving me, or something is moving through me. I am that which moves through me. There were a lot of interesting insights, but also questions that do come up whenever you listen to that very interesting video. And inner dance, the dance of life, even the outer dance, whatever you call it, seems to be exactly a movement, a process of going upwards as we go rightwards, which doesn't have to be that as well, because we know that the arrow could very well be pointing in all kinds of directionalities, but for the time being, movement as an unfoldment speaks to us deeply, although we could maybe invert certain things now. So there's no time. Time is an illusion is one of the messages that came up during that sharing with Ash. So that we now wonder, we now awe at this fourth brain state, consciousness that we're looking at. So one of the main tenets, one of the main proposals or hypotheses that are emerging through inner dance, energy school, the process in general, is what is the wakeful dream, the fourth state of awareness or consciousness that is being posited in these video series. What does it look like? What does it feel like to be outside of time? What does it mean to enfold time? If we are unfolding here in this upward, rightward direction, what is the directionality of the opposite? So I'm going to stop here to introduce Amara, if you haven't been introduced to her work. And from there we will be able to move on. So So enjoy.
The process took away everything that like I said, I thought I was. In that year period, I kind of climbed my way back up the mountain that I'd sort of fallen off of. And I thought I was at the top, but I was really kind of like, in this really nice place. But as I climbed my way through my own belief system and through my own suffering, and really, then the witness was born. Out of that 7 days, the witness was born. And I was able to take that witness and then look at everything in my life, really objectively, and look at my partner and look at myself, and I began to see it's not true. All these things I say about him, it's not really true. It's just perception. It's just limited perception. And all these things I say about me, they're not really true. And I had this great objectivity about the world. So me, I always say that me before was manifested ego. When I went into those 7 days after the inner dance, I became manifested energy. I couldn't remember my name. I tried to log on to my computer. I didn't know what my I didn't know what a password was. I didn't know what a user thing was. I couldn't remember any of it, and I sat there for 5 minutes. I just gave up. I said, I don't know. It doesn't matter. I don't know. I laid down, and then we did this session. And for me, what it felt like is, whether you know it or not, which is the beauty, you don't have to know, nobody has to know. It felt like every bit of wherever my ego would hide, wherever my identity would hide, or the lie would hide within me, you'd find it. Your hand would just find it, and it would like say, I see you, I see you. And it would chase it, and it was like a mountain, and it was like running and hiding, all over the place, and you'd find it, until finally it made its way to the very top, the very, very top. And I stood at the top, and I knew there was nowhere else to go. And I knew at that moment, this was the tipping point for me, and it was right before, I think, it was right before you fell asleep on the floor. It was really quite late.
I remember that.
And I knew if I go back to my old way of being, it's like a pleasant sort of hell, because I know too much. It will be like living in some weird dream.
Prison of life.
I call it, the luxury prison at best, and sometimes it's a horrible prison. But and if I go forward, then I die. This is what the mind, later I learned, it tells you, oh, you're going to die now, you'll die. And I was terrified. I was just terrified in that moment. I had nowhere else to turn. Like, you just pushed me everywhere upside down, everywhere I could go. And I stood there. And then this deep inner voice came in, and it said, jumping, not jumping, it's the same thing. There is no mountain. And then the whole thing collapsed, and it was what typically happens to people who go through an awakening. There was complete darkness, complete bursts of light, and then some things that happened, and then major amounts of downloads of information started streaming through. From that moment on, then we went in and we taught that morning to the people in KL. There was just a little bit more things that needed to adjust. And from that moment on, for 7 months straight, I was in a state of nearly unbearable bliss that never ended. Everything changed. My sleep changed, the way I ate changed, the clothes I wore, everything changed. The channels open, and I could see. This is when I could see into the future, into the past, very far, into the future, the present. I could feel the vibration. Everything was talking. Everything was open. It was... that was just my personal kind of experience. And it was like, take that flow that I experienced when the ego had quieted or dissolved in that 7 days, and then times 10,000 or 100,000. And then that's what life was. And it was miracle. It was actually miracles were starting to occur. And then this is where perfection perception was born. And then something occurred, which I now call, I saw also that the mind, that thoughts are just habitual energetic patterns of mind. And this was sort of like the solar system stopped being magnetized. There was no more gravity, there was no more magnetism, as you say. So there were no more thoughts orbiting in a habitual pattern.
Yeah.
It all stopped. And actually there wasn't any thought. And people think, well, how do you operate without thought? How do you live your life? How do you go grocery shopping? And then what took thought's place was naturally spontaneous arising discernment.
Yeah.
That it just knows. It knows.
Yeah.
It knows there's no right and
so
wrong,
good.
and yet it knows right from wrong.
It's so good.
And it's a huge difference. And I didn't, there was no thought at all in the mind for 3 days. And the first time a thought entered, it was incredibly painful.
That's what I was seeing this week.
Yeah, and then you saw that.
Yeah.
And then people have this funny feeling, one thing about awakening or tipping points or enlightenment is that what is experienced is beyond the mind's capability to understand as enlightenment. So anything that you perceive, spiritual enlightenment to be, it's pretty much not it. So we think, oh, the person will be like this, or they'll look like this, or they'll act like this.
Yeah, you already closed it.
Yeah, and then you can, pretty much be sure that's not it, because it is whatever it needs to be for the perfection of that moment. Only as you, but now you're at the top of the mountain, so we could say, now you're, the eye goes from identity to the eye of witness to the eye of infinity. So now you're infinity, and you actually understand that you're an emanation of an emanation of an emanation. It's quantum, and the possibilities are endlessly hooking up, That's why if you have a fight with someone, or you have a loving moment with someone, it's the same thing. It's all operating to awaken itself to the highest level always. There's nothing that goes unwasted. But this gets very tricky, because then people think, oh, well, that means nothing matters. If everything's the same, what does it matter?
Well, you mentioned the shift as one of the definitions of perfection perception is that every failure is an act of evolution, and so that's the only saving grace. People are able to frame it.
Yeah. So if we have an atrocity, and we learn from it, if we have a hurricane and then we, a typhoon, and then we learn, what has that really taught us or shown us about ourselves? And we learn a new way, And it's very, very, everything is very important until it's not. It's the only way I can frame it. It is until it isn't. And then the answer to everything is both and neither. And people don't like this. They don't like this answer. The ego does not like this answer, but it's the highest truth.
Yeah.
It's both yes and no at the same time. Yeah. But the discernment saves you. There's no need that needs saving, but the discernment arises to match that perfection, to be as that perfection, to act as that perfection all the time. When it's abiding, when you collapse back into the old way, which often happens, you're much more quickly and efficiently able to create the same circumstances for it to also to be resolved. Say something begins to orbit again, oh my God, here comes an orbit. I thought I was through orbiting, I thought I was through magnetizing, but here it comes. And then you can look at it so humbly, so beautifully, your own limitation. They'll come back. I call them soldiers. They always tell you we can't leave any soldiers behind. It's just we don't do that, Yeah. And you think I'm so free, we crossed the line. Oh my God, Tom is back there. then it's like, and Tom is called, Amara's jealousy. And now I have to go running back, and pull Amara's jealousy, out of the mud, and it's halfway alive, and, it's still beating. It has a heartbeat. Oh, God. And I have to set it free. I have to save it, and then I have to liberate it. Yeah, and then I can run back to safety. And this is what I do with people. I just simply do to them what was done to me. You don't even know you did that. But I say, I did a 10-hour private session with Pai, and he pushed me off the cliff. He didn't actually push me. That wouldn't have worked. But you brought me to the cliff top, and then you just left me there. Thanks. No.
No, sometimes I do. I do it.
Yeah.
No, that was a year, a whole year.
Yes, it was a whole year.
A whole year of trance. Everything was trance.
And for me, it was a whole year of what happened in those 7 days. And then it became what happened in those 7 months.